My full name is Yusuf Ameen Hemmings. Normally I go by Yusuf Ameen. Originally born in Brooklyn, New York. Lived most of my life in Orlando, Florida. And then I've been here in Tampa for about 8 years now. I lived till in Brooklyn for maybe about 5 years, so it wasn't too long before I moved to Orlando with my family. My mom decided to have everybody move down because of the warmer weather. They come from a tropical background, so she thought the warmer weather would be nicer, and the living here in Florida is a little bit slower and a little more calm for us, so she decided to move down here to Florida. My mother is from Central America. She's from Pedro Miguel, Panama, and my dad is from Jamaica. So this is something that they were used to. They like I said, the weather was too much for them, so they decided they want to move down here. I guess implement those two things. So it's really important for me to respect leadership and understand leadership and follow leadership, and I think once you have that, the sacrifices that you make because of leadership, it just they go perfect hand in hand. That's it. So that's one thing that actually affected me a lot from, I guess, Sunni Islam, because that leadership, the leaders that we have always been great, and their sacrifice that they made for it it's shown. So that's always hit me really hard.
And I'll ask one final question. Is this leadership quality something that you're trying to inculcate in your kids as well, and really hone in and learn that,
yeah,
this is something we gotta learn from and model around it?
I would think so, because there is a Sunni hadith from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that the father to his children is like the prophet to his nation. So I've always tried to make sure, of course, that leadership, and I guess lead my ship, as I was told by one leader, to make sure we lead our ship in the best way so that they become good leaders and lead, So that, yeah. Inshallah.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
So if you can just tell us what your name is and where you're from?
My full name is Yusuf Ameen Hemmings. Normally I go by Yusuf Ameen. Originally born in Brooklyn, New York. Lived most of my life in Orlando, Florida. And then I've been here in Tampa for about 8 years now.
Really? So how long did you live in Brooklyn, was it?
Yeah, I lived till in Brooklyn for maybe about 5 years, so it wasn't too long before I moved to Orlando with my family. My mom decided to have everybody move down because of the warmer weather. They come from a tropical background, so she thought the warmer weather would be nicer, and the living here in Florida is a little bit slower and a little more calm for us, so she decided to move down here to Florida.
Okay. You mentioned tropical weather, so
Yes.
where is she originally from?
Well, my mother is from Central America. She's from Pedro Miguel, Panama, and my dad is from Jamaica. So this is something that they were used to. They like I said, the weather was too much for them, so they decided they want to move down here.
And you settled into Orlando right away then, I guess?
Pretty much, it was, when we came down here, we didn't want to move. We were I was young, but the fast life there in New York City was something that we were used to. Everything's go and go, and we came down here. We moved down in our house, and the neighborhood is now full of it's a complex now, but when we moved there, it was a giant orange grove. So, about 30 years ago, Orlando was pretty slow, and, you had to have a car or you were walking everywhere. So, Orlando is starting to catch up to New York City. So, surprisingly, I decided to move here because it was a little slower. The community is better. Just in my opinion, I felt that it was a little more diverse, so I decided to come here, and there were some people that I wanted to come here, and some of the people here I was a little comfortable with, so we decided to come here. Me and my wife decided to move here after I graduated. I have 4 older sisters, and I have 1 younger brother. I have 1 sister who comes back and forth from here and North Carolina, so her kids are up there going to school now. She's the oldest. I have 1 sister who now lives in Dubai. So they just moved there to teach. So they just moved there this year, maybe this school year. And I have 2 sisters. One's here in Tampa. We just met her, actually. And they live actually in the front of the neighborhood, her and her husband. and another sister that's in Orlando, and my youngest brother, who's his name's Omar. He lives in Orlando. Mom, you know, and in the, I guess the Hispanic culture, it's one thing that's really, family is a big thing, you know, and she's always taught us to make sure we take care of each other and stay near each other and things like that. Well, as I mentioned, my mom is from Panama, so in the, you know, South and Central America, Catholicism is you know, is a big thing. So she always came from a very religious and God-minded culture. So it was always something that was really important for them. So and my dad, he came from Jamaica, so, and he was Rastafarian. So it was a big change when he moved here. He went to England first and then moved here to the States in New York. And that's where he and my mom met. And they were both very God-minded. They wanted some truth. So they came from they went converted to the Nation of Islam. And from there, after they got married, and sometime later, they both converted to, I guess, Orthodox Islam. You know, it was a big jump for them, because coming from the Nation of Islam and the beliefs are really different. And then when Warith Muhammad became so-called Sunni Islam, a lot of his followers, which was my mom and dad, came over with him. So that's where, you know, that finding the truth and being with, you know, finding that one truth, which is God, and things like that, there's something that's always been within them. So growing up, we've always been taught Sunni Islam. We went to the Sunni private schools, me and my brothers and sisters. So it was always something that was taught with us. And actually my stepfather he was a Sunni imam in New York. He was one of the first chaplains in the New York prisons to go and teach Islam to the inmates in the prisons there. So it's something that's very, you know, that's always been pushed in our family. So coming from that, you know, it's always good to have that good. Yeah, since we were kids, there's always been something that, you know, there's always been, you know, we know there's something, we have to do the right thing and make the right choices. So there's always been something my mom pushed, you know, on the weekdays. Of course, we went to, like I said, we went to the Islamic private school. On the weekends, she had us doing the Al-Qaeda, you know, not Al-Qaeda terrorists, but Al-Qaeda, the little Quranic Arabic books they called them that. And, you know, so that we're learning Quran and learning how to read Quran and things like that. So it's always been something that was pushed for us since we were kids. I mean, I remember times where I was like, well, we don't need to do this every day of the week. You know, even it just got, you know, I mean, it just got really strenuous for me and my younger brother, because we were like, we want to go play, you know. So it was just something that my mom was like, well, we have to go do this, you have to go there. And then after that, you can go hang out with your friends, things like that. So it's always been something that's been pushed for us, you know. So it's been a #1 thing for my mom. Well, coming from, because I came from secular school, public school, originally coming in, it was kind of hard for me. Because, you know, I was used to that way, and being with my friends, clowning, things like that. So when we went to the Muslim school, I was considered kind of like the clown, and would get in trouble somewhat. So, you know, and I was a know-it-all, and the teachers obviously weren't okay with that, and it kind of got me in trouble sometimes. So it was kind of a different coming in, even though that was something that we wanted to do, you know, and actually that kind of got me on on firm ground, you know, Islamically, and it made me understand the importance of Islam and wanting to be Muslim and things like that. And then when I left the school, I felt that I needed to be more of an impact on people than them being an impact on me. So it was something that I saw that when I went to, it was a complete difference. It wasn't necessarily a culture class, because I was in the culture, I knew the things, I knew the people, and it was all just, it was something that it was a part of me already. So it was just more of me just going in there and not allowing it to affect me even more. So it didn't necessarily wasn't a big change for me. I would say I did. Talking back to a lot of my friends that I've just recently, I saw one of my friends that we went to high school together. We were childhood friends. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Orlando, and we spent a lot of time together. And you know, he lives his life now, and obviously I have mine. We saw each other just recently at a cultural charity festival downtown Tampa. And we saw each other, and it was a good, happy moment. We hugged, saw each other, talked, and things like that. And seeing him, I remember him telling me, he's like, he mentioned a couple of our other friends. And he says, I talked to them recently, and he spoke of some of their characteristics and his characteristics. And he says, we always knew that you were always firm in your beliefs. And he said to me, he says, and I'm glad that I just saw you now, and we haven't seen each other in years. He said, I'm glad I saw you because I've been trying to get on some sort of path, and I want to be able to find the truth. And then he says, well, me and talking with some of our old friends, we know that this is something that you promote, and you walk it, you talk it. So, and not trying to toot my own horn, but he told me that, that anything that I can help him with, because he feels that he's lost, please, fill him in, So I've tried, we've contacted each other since then, and, obviously we've grown and matured, we have kids and things like that, but hopefully it would help, and I feel that even though it took almost 20-something years, alhamdulillah, it had some sort of impact on somebody, Image of Islam and Muslims when I was high school. I think it was really ignorant then. Not too many people knew about it. We weren't on the news. Russia was a big deal, and if you were Russian, you had a problem. I remember playing war games. We'd be like, you're the Russians, we're the Americans type thing. So now it's, we're the Muslims, we're the Americans. So, but back then, it wasn't that big of a deal. And, everybody knew I was Muslim. They just knew you don't eat pork, and you pray, you pray 5 times a day. So it wasn't something that was really an issue. And knowing with my friends, they knew that, when Ramadan came, I had to fast. They knew that I didn't eat pork when I came to their house. Things like that, it wasn't really a real big issue for me. And being that, when people see me, obviously, first thing, they don't think of Muslim. They see a black male, and they don't necessarily think of that, Even when they hear my name, I know I got a lot of people named Yusuf, So it wasn't something that, I had an issue with, Yeah, growing up, it was very, and I was really open about myself being Muslim, especially after coming from the private school. I was really proud of my Islam and proud of being a Muslim. So it wasn't, that's one thing when I learned when I went to the private school, is that they made sure that we knew of our religion, and that we were sure of it, and and actually from that I gained a big group of Muslim friends that I would spend time with outside of school. So in high school, I didn't necessarily hang out with people per se. I had these group of Muslim friends that I would always spend time with outside of school. So it wasn't, I try to make sure that even though we may have not been the best Muslims, and we were all trying, but we made sure we were with each other than other people who were not Muslims. In the private school, I was. My brother-in-law, who is in Dubai now, he always used to give us little stories here and there. He never told us who they were. He would give us stories. Like, well, I have a story to tell you. And he would randomly just tell us this. We were sitting down, on like a rainy day at home. Like when he first married my sister, and I just realized one time he was telling me the story of a man, who was getting water for his children, and he tried everything he could to try to get the water, and he mentioned about his hands being cut off. And I was like, and come to find out, as Abu Fadl Abbas, and it was interesting that I always, sometimes I go back to him, I tell him, I was like, well, you used to tell us all these stories when we were kids, and now we look at it and it's like, oh, okay, he was kind of hinting to us. And he's always been like that, kind of hint to you. He doesn't want to tell you straight out, this is what you need to follow, but he would give us these type of stories. And I remember him giving us stories about Imam Ali and the door of Khaybar and things like that. So all these little things he give a hint to, but not necessarily telling us who it is. He would tell, well, this is a friend of the Prophet, or this was one of a great man that lived during the time of Islam, and things like that. So, well, at school, in the private school, they did, but they would attribute it to the other companions and things like that. Like Omar, Abu Bakr, things like that. So these types of stories, like I remember being taught that, that Omar was the one who did Khaybar and the door of Khaybar and things like that. And so nothing really blatant, you know, where it would be like, okay, well, that's, you know, questionable altogether. But I don't remember hearing too much about it other than my brother-in-law telling us about it. In college, I was trying to find out, you know, and I was learning and trying to make sure my deen was everything about it. I had to do everything that I did had to do with religion and Islam. So I decided, you know, of course, spend more time at the masjid. A group of friends of I, because I'm a big basketball fan and we play basketball, I play in leagues and Muslim leagues and things like that. So those same group of guys that I always spend time with, they decided that, okay, before we go out and play basketball, let's make sure that we learn something about Islam. So we would have like what they call little halakas. So we would get together and we would talk about Islam and all these types of things. So there was something that was really important for me. And all of us at the same time, it was like great because all 6 or 7 of us were like, all right, we want to become better Muslims. So how are we going to do this? So we decided that before we have our fun, we would learn about the religion first. So one of the brothers would sit down and talk and speak about different things, you know, and we each took turns. And during that time, my same brother-in-law, he saw that. He could see that, you know, this was something that was important for me. And I remember this story almost like it was yesterday. He came to me and he's like, okay, well, there's a religious program going on and I want you to come. It's a speech, you know, and they have dinner after. And, you know, if you want to come, that's great. If you don't, he says, okay. So I said, no problem. You know, I would love to go, you know. So we go to the program and the speaker, I believe, I don't want to say his name, but I know that almost speech like it was right here in front of me. So he was talking about the different types of light, you know, and he broke it down in nur, you know, and at the end of the speech, he did it in another language, and I believe it was in Urdu. So he did it in another language. So I didn't necessarily know what he was saying, but I noticed around me, and I look around, everyone's crying, you know, including my brother-in-law. So I didn't know what was going on. So I'm like, okay. And I'm just sitting there, you know, and I would say that I'm pretty much open-minded about everything. You know, anything that comes to me is new. I'm gonna listen to it. I'm gonna hear about it. And if I agree with it, then I'll agree with it. And if I don't, I'm gonna question and you know, scrutinize, which is what we've been taught to do as Muslims. So after it was done, and we were eating. Well, after it was done, everybody gets up and of course beating their chest and come find it's matam or not zinjir, but they're doing latmiya. And you know, I'm looking around and in comes like a casket, you know. So everyone's touching it, and it's you know, it's baby size. So you know, everyone's touching it. I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'm still trying to question it, and I didn't want to flip out and say, what is this, you know, and you know, you hear stories, this is shirk, you know, type thing. So I didn't, and I just sat there and I just kind of, you know, went with the flow. I didn't necessarily touch it, but after, I remember at dinner we were sitting down, and he's like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, "Well, the speech was. I thought the speech was awesome. I thought it was great. You know, he did a good job explaining the different levels of nur. He did a good job explaining, you know, how each one affects us, you know, and how it affects the angels and things like that." And I said, but at the part where he was doing it in another language, I didn't understand it fully. You know, because the Masa'ib that he did, it was, first he started off in English, where my brother-in-law understood, and he was crying from. And then when he did in Urdu, obviously everyone's crying. So I said, well, what about the part when they started crying and the casket and everything? And he proceeded to explain to me about the different things. This is Muharram, you know, this is the month where, you know, Imam Hussein was killed, you know, and I was like, I know of Imam Hussein, but, you know, when I was a kid during that time, and now, I mean, it's not as affected. Everybody knows Imam Hussein lived until he was really old, pretty old, you know. But back then, I mean, everyone thought Imam Ali stayed 13 forever, and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein were babies forever. That was the idea, you know. They didn't grow up to become men and defend Islam, you know. So He's like, well, he grew, and I was like, okay, the prophet's grandson, right? And he's like, yes, he grew to be an old man, had kids and children, things like that. And I believe it was the night of Ali Asghar. So he explained that was the casket and the people touching the alams and things like that. I said, okay, understandable. And I just, I kept continuing asking questions, so why do we do it? Why is it commemorated? Tell me more about Imam Hussein. And he saw that the interest was there, so he gave me the book, Hussein, Savior of Islam. I forget the author, but I remember reading that book in like 2 days, and I couldn't believe it, it really hit me hard. And my brother-in-law would tell you to this day that he said that I stayed in my room in the dark for like ever, unless I had to go to school or go to work, And I said I couldn't believe it, and there's a part in the book, because it starts off, the author does a really good job. First, he starts off creation of man, and he talks about the prophets and how, he talks about Prophet Isa a lot in there. And then in the end, he gives the story of Imam Hussein and what led to it, Muslim ibn Aqil and things like that. And what hit me the most was when the story of his sons, Muslim ibn Aqil alayhi salam, his sons, and how Ibrahim and Muhammad, I believe, before they were martyred, they're telling the person who was going to kill him, no, slaughter me first so I don't have to, so I can. And then as they put the bodies in the river, one of the bodies waited and it just really hit me really hard. And how can people do this to children, So, and I said, well, I don't understand that, and I don't understand how we are Muslims and we are still doing these things, and, and how they did these things to the people who love the Prophet. So it affected me really hard. And I don't remember it fully, but he said that I would stay in the dark. I wouldn't talk much, and a lot of times I would just read, and read different things. And I remember reading one of the Imam Khomeini's jurisprudence book. I remember reading Man and Universe. All these books. I started picking them up and reading them. And then for Eid one day, and I was really looking for this book. He got a Najah Balaga for me. And when he got that for me, it was really a big deal because I got to read that from cover to cover. So all of these things were coming together, and spending time with my friends. I was still going to the halakas, mind you, because basketball was still one of my favorite things to do, even though I was going through a so-called depression. And I guess I was going through withdrawal of Sunni Islam, maybe. So my friends saw that, and they wouldn't let me speak during the halakas. And I remember a friend of mine telling me to this day that he says, don't spend time with your brother-in-law. Shias are kafir, And I said, how do you know? And he says, ulama say that they are. And I said, well, that's not enough for me. I said, you got to tell me a little bit more than that. Because these are my friends. I still spend time with them, and their opinion counted, because, this is my social aspect of life, and I was living on my own at this time. So it was just me and whatever time I spent with my brother-in-law with these guys playing basketball, and then schoolwork or work, So a lot, he was the only one that told me that, right blatant me in my face, The other guys, they would say, well, I don't know, it's, I would try to stay away because, it's not really safe. I said, well, why isn't it safe? We would get in these discussions, and they would tell me because, a lot of the things they do is questionable. And I said, well, how so? Prove it, and I was the only one asking, prove it. And they would get frustrated, because, we were just learning from each other, and we didn't have any scholar there telling us and giving us halakas. We would just get a little bit from Quran and a little bit hadith and then talk about it, So I was like, well, unless you can prove it to me otherwise, then you can't tell me it's wrong. It's not fair to say. So I began praying with my hands down and praying, learning about Shia jurisprudence and, how we pray. And, one of my friends, I remember him saying to me, we prayed together at the masjid, and as we were leaving, he said that I noticed that every time we did a different position in the prayer, you did the takbir. And I said, yeah. And he says, that, you know, I've read about that before, but you shouldn't do that. I said, why not? You know, if you read about it, it means that it's a practice that's done, you know, no matter what madhab is it, you know. And I said, and I've been reading about it. And I remember that friend, he started spending time with my brother-in-law, asking him for books and different things. So he would give him like fiqh books so he can try, I guess his job, what he felt his job was to try to prove it wrong. So he got all these fiqh books and things like that. And he's like, well, there's no references. He's like, well, fiqh books don't give references. You know, that's what the ulama are for. We rely on them to give us the fiqh, and because they've studied the references, they know where to look for it. But anyways, that was going on, and a lot of these things were happening. So slowly but surely, they stopped spending time with me. And we kind of kept it more of just the basketball thing. Some of them don't talk to me anymore. And some of them now have, you know, openly say, he's kafir, stay away from him. I mean, some of these guys, like, known them since they were in their Pampers, you know. And, you know, now they're calling me somebody that's kind of brought them along as younger guys, you know. They don't speak to me, and, you know, it's okay. I've always been that type that's never been affected by others. That's why when as I mentioned, when I went to high school, it wasn't really a big shock, because I wasn't trying to be popular or be amongst, you know, it wasn't something that was I guess something I had to do. So being unpopular was okay with me, as long as I felt that this was the truth and it hadn't been proved otherwise. And I would tell them, you know, please prove it to me, you know. And it was never something that they could do. They could just say and call names and bash, and but I was like, well, that's not enough for me. You can call me all the names you'd like, but please prove it, you know. So right now it's just been more of a basketball, a sports thing. So Assalamu alaikum, we see each other. If anything else happens, then you know we just talk about it. You know, some of them have, you know, I guess eased it down a little bit. We still send emails and see how each other's doing, make sure everybody's okay. And if they have a question, I try to answer it. I try not to be too much in their face about it. But they know who I am, and you know, I guess to let them know that, you know, taqiyya is not something that we need to do, especially here in America. And I don't need to do it. You know my beliefs. I know yours. And if you have a question about it, feel free, you know. So that's been kind of that, because it took me some time. I went through the transition. First it was, you know, Sunni, and then I was like, well, we're all Muslim, you know, and everybody goes through that transition. You know, we're all Muslim. No one's different from the other. And I would say maybe about a year. I was still reading both books, and I would prove from both references and try to learn everything. I was at that point, you know, I was sucking in any type of knowledge that I can get from anywhere. So maybe about a year, and I had a real, like, it was like Allah said it for me perfectly, that I can get this chance to do as much research as I can to learn about it. So it was almost as if it was like slow motion. Maybe that was the depression he meant. You know, it was almost like slow motion for me. And that year, I got a lot of chance to learn a lot of things, and you know, transition. It was because, you know, you're losing friends. You're losing some people that you're really close with. I mean, even family members, you know, were in conflict with it. You know, I remember, you know, stories of people, you know, throwing Najib Alaga and ripping it and saying, well, this is not, you know, different things like that. I remember one situation, I was with friends at their house, and I was reading the Sahifa Sajadiyya. I was reading the tafsir on it, and I was just reading the book, and one brother told me, he says, don't read this book, you know, because they do muta. I was like, okay, that's the only reason you don't want me to read that book. I said, okay. I said, anything else? And he says, no, just don't read it. So, and I was almost afraid to spend the night there that night. I was worried because he was a foreign brother and he had just moved here. So I don't know what I was gonna get that night. So I kind of stayed up all night and watched him watch me. So it was an interesting night, that one. So that transition was it was tough. It was tough. How did I deal with it? Prayer, you know, trying to get that nearness to Allah. I mean, no one, I think that no one went through as much hardship as Imam Hussein and his family. But Imam Ali also, I mean, I would refer to him a lot, you know. I mean, he got to the point where people wouldn't say salam to him, you know. And he would, and not to where they wouldn't say salam, but when he said salam to them, they wouldn't reply back. So I got a lot of that, you know, when I would go to the masjids and things like that, the different masjids. Because the masjids in Orlando, they were far from me. So when I would come back from school or whatever, I would go to any of the masjids, and then people wouldn't say salam, you know, just because you were praying with your hands down, you know, not knowing if I could have been Maliki or whatever. They just didn't, you know. So Imam Ali was definitely an example for me, reading through Najm al-Balagha and things like that, and his hardships that he went through, you know, after the demise of the Prophet. I think that Imam Ali, I mean, he should be an inspiration for everyone, but I mean, his life hits every aspect of life that any Muslim can relate to. You know, the hardships, the ups, the downs, the battles, the sacrifices, you know. So all of those things, you know, within the hardships, I definitely can say that I got a lot of inspiration from that. Yeah, I mean, coming from, I guess, a Sunni background or a Sunni family, my mom, like I said, she came from Catholicism, then to Nation of Islam, and then to Sunni Islam. And it was slightly different because it had more of it had a Warisdi Muhammad Sunni background, where a lot of it's very pro-black, and my mom wanted us to have that, you know, and it's. I mean, I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily would say I'm pro-black, or I wouldn't say I'm not pro-black, or either way, either or. But you know, I guess she felt that we were maybe losing that aspect of it, so it was really hard for her to see us, especially me and my younger brother now, who's learning about it, to come over and transition into that. It was hard for her because she wanted us to be a family, you know. And that was big on her family, make sure we're together, we all go to the masjid together. And now I came along and not everybody's going to the masjid together because I'm going to Jafari or Hosseini or wherever masjid I'm going to, and it's not necessarily how she wants it to be. So it was a conflict at first, you know, and it was a lot of issues that she had. Well, we're not Sunni, we're not Shia. That was a big argument. It's like, well, Mom, there is slight differences. You know, and there is some masjids that we can't necessarily go to without having some sort of an issue or disagreement. Not necessarily the masjid she was going to per se, because it was, I guess it was more of a Warisdi Muhammad masjid. But the person there did challenge us a couple times, so it was hard because she saw that, and she saw that, you know, it was a change for me, you know, we would kind of bump heads at times with some of the things, and like some of the ways that we teach the kids on how to pray, and some of the ways that we were praying, and some of the things like combining the prayers and praying on the turba. She didn't see the importance of, you know, necessarily praying on that, and it's like, well, then we have the prayer mats and the prayer rugs, and why do you need the dirt and the clay? So she had, you know, all these new things, you know, and a lot of times people don't do well with change, even though she did transition, you know, almost 3 times. So, you know, but now, you know, it's coming along. You know, my mom lives with me now, and, you know, obviously when you live with people, it has more of an impact on them. She sees how it's changed me, and that, you know, that I guess the full transition, you know, has affected me, and that, you know, hopefully it has some sort of effect on her. Well, yeah, I guess when my mom decided, you know, because she goes with us to the programs now every Saturday when we have the programs at the center. So she comes with us, you know. She won't necessarily tell you that this is what she believes, because she doesn't, you know, we have this we have a fun relationship where, you know, she doesn't want to necessarily tell me, well, this is what it is truthful, but, you know, now that she sees my brothers and sisters are going there now. So it's we've kind of pulled her in by the family aspect. And as she's there, we tell her about different things, you know, well, why you have Imam Ali and the Adhan, and why do you have, why is the Imams important? Why do you have to remember Imam Hussein every year and commemorate his martyrdom, things like that. So a lot of times those things come up, and you know, even now, you know, she talks about how the story of Zainab always affects her, you know. So and how she was, you know, martyred, and how she was dragged from Karbala to Kufa to Sham. You know, she tells us about those. So that alone tells me that, you know, has had some impact on her, and you know, and through her actions, even going to the center. Because my mom would blatantly tell you, if she doesn't want to do it, she won't do it, meaning that she dislikes it altogether. But her actions by going and coming with us, you know, has shown that, you know, that transition and has some sort of impact on her. Well, I would say all of them now are pretty much Shia. I was one of the first ones who came in and decided that, you know, this is what I want to do, and this is the path that I want to follow. And I remember as one time as me and my brother were working together in Orlando, and it gave us a chance to actually do a lot of talking. And you know, he was still going to the masjid, and his name's Omar, you know, so we like, bro, you have to change your name. We're gonna use your middle name, Sharif. So if he hears that, you know, he's gonna be like, he'll probably laugh it off. But even now today, most of the brothers like, well, we're not gonna, we'll call you Sharif from now on. So, you know, he's learned about it, and you know, we gave him books, Najib Balagha, different tafsir, Ayatul Puya tafsir, different like that. So he's come along and come along pretty well. And my sisters, you know, my brother-in-law, obviously he's married to one of my sisters, so she's the one, she's Shia as well. And my three other sisters, one lives in Tampa here, she's also. So it's had a great impact on them. You know, they see that, you know, how it's changed my brother and myself. So they just came along. And of course they want their kids to follow. You know, my nephews, they're now starting college. So my oldest sister that lives in North Carolina, she wants them to make sure that they're, you know, if anybody she wants them to be like myself, my brother-in-law, and my brother. So it's been something that, you know, she's been really pulling. She's like, this is what she wants, you know, and she not necessarily would say, oh, I'm Shia per se, but she would want her kids to make sure that they come to the masjid with us and follow that. With my nephews and them going to college and everything, and being amongst non-Muslims and everything, she would want that example from myself, my brother-in-law, and my younger brother. So she's always made sure that they follow that and make sure they try to use us as an example for them. And they're good kids, and they've grown up to be very smart and hardworking. So it's you know, it seems, you know, she feels that it's had some sort of impact on them as well. So, and anytime they come around, they come down here to visit us, this is always something that we try to, you know, at least give a little lesson, you know, either through our actions or just, you know, maybe sit down together and just talk about what's going on with them in their lives and things like that. I don't want to say that it was me. I would say me and my brother-in-law has put a lot of work into the effort of making sure the people that he loves and the people that are around him have become, you know, on the true path. And much credit to him. You know, he's done a lot of work. You know, he's known as the person to go in the Sunni masjid as soon as somebody gives their shahada and grab them up, you know, and teach them about Ahlul Bayt. And they hate him for that, but but you know, and he's known all over Orlando for that. I would say there has been quite a bit of challenges. It's a culture clash. I mean, coming from, you know, I guess a lot of people weren't, because the way I see it, a lot of the brothers that are foreigner brothers, they come here and, you know, they establish their communities, and mostly the people who look like them do it, you know, come in and practice it, especially Shia Islam, because it's been such a hidden religion, and back home, I know that because of scrutiny and people, being killed and things like that, it's been something that's been behind doors, So I guess coming here it's just something that's natural. So somebody who comes in different, you get a lot of stares and and even that first night when I went with my brother-in-law, I was like, okay, well, everyone's staring at me, and we were the only two black Muslims there, so it was, you get a lot of eyes. So again, so it's hard for both people, myself and for the brothers that are there, because it's not something they see every day. How do they? I mean, they don't know who I am. I don't know who they are. So it's been a hard transition. First, now it's no problem. A lot of the brothers know me, and I get along. I grew up with a lot of their kids and went to college with some of their kids. So a lot of the brothers know me. So we don't have as much issue now. But when we came in, it was quite an issue. I know what truth is, and again, I didn't try to allow people to affect. I honestly believe that people don't hinder you from your religion, because it should be between you and Allah, not necessarily between you and those people, because they have maybe some sort of hang-ups or some sort of not necessarily, they have some sort of, not racism, but some sort of it's a cultural clash for them. That's something that they're not used to, and because they're not used to it and you're not used to them, sometimes you react differently. So it didn't affect me. The masjid is not, the masjid or the center is not what makes me, or the people in the masjid is not what makes me. So I figured that's not going to be something that affected my going to the masjid or going to the center. And I just kept doing what I do best, and trying to become a better Muslim.
I'm assuming after Orlando you moved to Tampa,
Mm-hmm.
and you went to a new community,
Yes.
new center. How was that transition? How did that transition go?
Well, my original reason for it was because of moving from Orlando to Tampa. My original reason was because of the diversity in the Tampa community. I felt that everyone comes together here, and it seemed like there was a lot more converts, or a lot more brothers that came from Sunni Islam, and a couple of brothers I know that definitely used to be Sunni at the masjid. So, and I had known maybe about 3 or 4 other brothers that moved here already. So it was just something that I wanted to do because of that. I mean, my original goal after I graduated from college was to come here and be a part of the community, help out any way I can, and be a full-fledged, not necessarily, I guess, a member, if you want to call it that, to make sure I'm in it and making sure that I'm a part of it. So that was the goal when I moved here. I would tell them that, seek the truth, and make that intention. And when you make the intention, Allah is going to tell you and bring you to the truth, no matter what it is. I mean, Ahlul Bayt will always show themselves by themselves. Me saying and giving you a long, elaborated explanation is not going to it's not going to change your mind one way or the other. But Ahlul Bayt have shown themselves time and time again, throughout history, today, and even by those ulama today that are representing them, have shown, what is. I guess I have a lot of stories.
If you could just share one.
Well, I would say maybe the story of Qasim, that I named my first son after him, and his stance, even though he was young, that he defended his uncle no matter what, and that he was the son of Imam Hassan, and I guess the impact that he had, on Imam Hussein, even though, I mean, today we have nephews and we have people that we're related to, and we wouldn't necessarily have that reverence for them, as Imam Hussein had for his nephew. And he knew that, I guess that was his last amana, his trust for his brother. So to give that up, and to sacrifice that, for truth, hence the reason why I named my first son, Qasim,
5 kids.
5 kids. I have 1 on the way.
of the kids?
The oldest is Qasim, he's 8. Second is Mohsen, he's 6. They're all 2 years apart. The third one is Ruqayya, she's 4. And then we have Zainab and Asya, they are 2. And then we have another one on the way. I guess, I guess one thing that I've learned from Shia Islam is leadership and sacrifice. And I've always tried to, I guess, implement those 2 things. So it's really important for me to respect leadership and understand leadership and follow leadership, and I think once you have that, the sacrifices that you make because of leadership, it just they go perfect hand in hand. That's it. So that's one thing that actually affected me a lot from, I guess, Sunni Islam, because that leadership, the leaders that we have always been great, and their sacrifice that they made for it it's shown. So that's always hit me really hard. I would think so, because there is a Sunni hadith from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that the father to his children is like the prophet to his nation. So I've always tried to make sure, of course, that leadership, and I guess lead my ship, as I was told by one leader, to make sure we lead our ship in the best way, so that they become good leaders and lead, So yeah. Inshallah.